guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series. We are heading into chapter 4 of Buxton Peak, book 2, Center Stage. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to the first few chapters, please go back and do that because you probably won't understand this. We ran out of time on the video at the end of chapter 3, so I'm just going to read the last couple of paragraphs. They had just gotten into the hotel after leaving the hospital, and the lady who had helped Rhonda get to the hospital had handed back the cell phone to Megan, and she thanked her profusely. With that, Ian led her away and over to the elevator. Megan almost started laughing when she noticed the pretty vase next to the large mirror that Rhonda had described the day before. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, and her legs buckled from exhaustion. Ed reached down and scooped Megan into his arms. She'd never realized how much she'd grown to appreciate this big teddy bear of a friend. He must care about Ian and his mates way more than he let the world see. She wrapped her arms around Ed's neck and held on as the elevator took the group up to the 5th floor penthouse suite of rooms. She never saw what they looked like until she woke up almost 14 hours later. Okay, we're going to start into chapter 4, which I have named Chateaubriand. Megan woke up in a strange room wearing sweats and a t-shirt that smelled like Ian, who was lying next to her watching her sleep. He instinctively reached over to retrieve a water bottle from the bedside table, and she downed most of it without pausing. "You're probably hungry." "I want a bath." Megan laid back down on the bed. Ian laughed lightly but reached over for his cell phone. "Jeremy, Megan needs food." He barely waited for his manager to answer before he hung up the phone and laid back down next to her in the dark. She was tempted to roll over and snuggle with him, but she probably didn't smell all that great. Her mouth felt like she hadn't brushed her teeth in 2 days, which was probably about accurate. Plus, food probably was a good idea, so she didn't argue. She just stared at her husband with a longing that was reflected in his eyes. They waited until a light knock at the door signaled the arrival of food. Jeremy pushed in a room service cart with a variety of foods, including a Diet Coke, which she grabbed first. "How did you know?" Megan asked with a contented sigh, then twisted the cap and sucked down half the bottle. "I think the whole world knows now about how much you like Diet Coke," Jeremy said. That made her stop short and look over at him. "What are you talking about?" A hint of apprehension pricked the back of Megan's mind. "I think I'll let your husband explain." Jeremy backed away and chuckled as he ducked out the door. Megan whipped her head toward Ian. "Well, between the girl at the gas station telling Stacy exactly what kind of car we were driving in, the fact that you bought a Diet Coke, and then that you drank 3 glasses of Diet Coke while you were chumming it up at McDonald's, it made the first paragraph of her article." "Please tell me you're joking." Apprehension tightened into panic. "I'm not." Ian sat back, tucking his hands behind his head. "Stacy managed to get her article published in Entertainment Weekly." Megan suddenly lost her appetite. "I thought it was just going on her blog." Megan's whisper was barely audible. "Relax," Ian said, rubbing his hand on her arm. "She talked you up like you were old mates. She wrote something about learning from you what it was like to be bothered at dinner, and by the end of the afternoon, together, she understands completely what I see in you." "Wow." Megan reached back over to the tray of food and lifted a silver lid to reveal a steaming plate of beef and vegetables. That was really nice of her. She pulled the plate over to her and ate a mouthful of the best beef tenderloin she'd ever eaten. Then she stopped and looked at Ian. "What is this?" "It's a Chateaubriand," he pronounced perfectly. "Don't you like it? It's one of the finest cuts of beef I could have ordered for you. I can get you something more simple if you'd like. Here, there are some baguettes. They're pretty simple. Just bread, really. Would you rather have cereal or eggs? You slept through breakfast time. What do you want? I can order you anything." He was starting to sound a little frantic and picked up his cell phone. "Ian," she grabbed his hand. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted. Ever." He visibly relaxed and smiled a little. He just wanted to make her happy. It was endearing. "Well," he looked at her seductively, "you should try the balsamic roasted vegetables, and there are chateau potatoes here as well." He stabbed one with a fork and brought it close to her mouth to feed it to her. He raised his eyebrows and placed the delicate little potato on her tongue. This was getting kind of fun. She nodded over to the baguette to indicate she'd like to try that as well. He picked it up and smothered it in some sort of homemade butter. It was crusty and warm and delicious. It wasn't just because she was incredibly hungry. The food was exceptional. He was obviously trying to impress her with the finer things she would experience living in his world. It didn't hurt that he was able to recreate some of the passion they'd experienced on their honeymoon. After being apart for 2 months, it wasn't going to take much effort. Suddenly hungry for way more than just food, she let him feed her for a few more minutes and returned to her original request. How about that bath? Ian scooped Megan off the bed and carried her into the adjoining room, which contained the finest jacuzzi tub she'd ever seen, surrounded by marble and brass. His eyes barely left hers as he set her down and started the water. Her attention was drawn to the sink, distracted by another item she'd been longing for, a toothbrush. She rushed to the sink and smiled at Ian with as much happiness as when she'd seen the Diet Coke. The finer things in life were nothing without the basics. She was a simple girl from rural Michigan being spoiled amidst finery. The day just kept getting better from there. Megan stretched across an empty bed and heard voices in the next room. It took her a few minutes to orient herself in the dark, and a few more minutes to locate some clothes. She was grateful to find a fluffy robe and slippers nearby and quietly tiptoed over by the door to eavesdrop on her husband and his friends. "Look," Jeremy's voice commanded, "you guys have exactly 5 shows left on this European tour, and if you can't get your act together and stay focused, you'll be in breach of contract. Am I making myself clear?" What else happened in the time since she returned from the hospital? She wasn't even sure how many days she'd been in France or what day of the week it was. She was probably missing a lot of school, but had no real desire to go home yet. "Whatever you kids do after that is up to you, short of killing each other, of course." Megan assumed Jeremy was mostly talking to Kai and Gary. "We can pull this off, mates." Ian spoke quietly but sternly. "We've been together a long time." "Fine, I'll stay through Stockholm, but after that I'm gone," Gary said. "Good," Kai grumbled. "You need to find someplace to sober up." "You want to go again, Kai?" Megan was startled to hear Gary's chair pushed back and Kai's apparent response. There was a brief scuffle, and then it was obvious they'd both been put back in their places by James and Ed. Megan guessed they were not far off the shoulders of these 2 hot heads. "Probably not a bad idea to take a little break anyway," Andy said. "Get our heads together, figure things out." After a few minutes, chairs moved and Ian whispered something. She pressed her ear to the door, trying to understand. She couldn't resist peeking out the door. She saw something that reminded her that she was an outsider in their world. 4 young men, arms around each other's shoulders and heads together. It almost reminded her of a football team's huddle, but way more intimate. These guys really did care about one another. They were like brothers. They fought, they made up. She felt like she was intruding, so she quietly clicked the door into place and got back in bed. That is the end of chapter 4. If you liked this chapter or if you like these video series, I would love it if you would give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and maybe share this video series on social media. And when I come back, we will start into chapter 5.